So, a cop pulls over a guy suspected of drink driving, and he approaches the car, and he opens the driver's door, and the driver just falls out of the car onto the road. And the cop says, "Christ, you can't even walk." And the guy says, "Why do you think I took the fucking car?" Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Okay, let's do a Q&A. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bat Country. Stinks. Have you pooped while I was setting up the camera? It's been a very long time since I did a Q&A format video, and I have a big milestone, a big sobriety milestone coming up. And when those come up, I kind of like to share them with the community, with you fine people, especially those of you who've been with me since the start. And I think a Q&A is a good opportunity to just speak honestly and off the cuff about whatever it is that's on your mind. And that's how I celebrate my milestones. So let's just get straight into it. The first question from Cry Checking. With your extensive experience of travelling the globe and living within different countries, in your opinion, which country had the worst culture around drinking? Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan was the worst place for alcoholism that I've ever seen. I've been to places that are very heavy and hard drinking, but in general, the normal population, the alcoholism doesn't bleed over into the general population in a way that it does in a place like Kazakhstan. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. First of all, an example of a place where drinking is notoriously hard, but alcoholism is not disrupting the entire population. So I lived in Croatia, in Zagreb, a famously hard drinking Eastern European country. An amazing place. I would live there again in a heartbeat. But it's a difficult place to be sober, and drinking is very, very encouraged. But it's not ruining the society. In Kazakhstan, particularly in smaller towns and cities, I didn't just see alcoholics, I also saw the way in which their alcoholism was having an impact on the population, the society around them. I visited a city called Aktau, which is in the west of Kazakhstan on the coast of the Caspian Sea. And I was there for about a month, actually. And when I arrived in that city, I had to walk about 24 kilometers from a train station in a place called Mangistau. And I had to walk across the steppe in the kind of desert area to get to this city called Aktau, to get to a hotel. And walking as the kind of city, I reached the outer limit of the city and then some urban build-up and some suburbs before you get to the city centre. And all around the edge of that city was a level of deprivation and alcoholism that I was not prepared for. Extreme poverty, but compounded by very visible effects of alcoholism in the street. So I was walking down this kind of dirt road on the outskirts of Aktau, and most of the houses were kind of poorly built shacks with tin roofs and that kind of thing, collapsing and rusted. And there were plumes of smoke coming from various buildings around. And I would see drunk old men in the very early afternoon, with their shirts off and very poor quality tattoos on their bodies, no teeth and that kind of thing, stumbling around in the street with one shoe on. And that's not unusual in places where the quality of life is not very good. Why it was different in Kazakhstan is also because I could see the generation. So I would see the grandfather stumbling around drunk, and then I would see perhaps the father of a particular family group with his car all smashed up where he's been bouncing it from side to side of the road. And then I would see his kids just playing naked around a puddle, unsupervised. A lot of this is projection because my time in Kazakhstan was not very good. And every time from now on that I criticize Kazakhstan, I want to add a serious caveat that the vast majority of people I met there were fantastic and went out of their way to be friendly and helpful and supportive. Kazakhstan is a great country, aside from where it's not. And a place like Aktau, which is this old nuclear Soviet city, a secret city, built for the purpose of generating nuclear power and having old soldiers and stuff forcibly moved to go and live there. And then the nuclear power plant ceasing operations, it left a big hole in the ground. And I think there's a lot of like, it's not just poverty, it's also trauma. Those old soldiers who are kind of fighting in Chechnya and that kind of thing, being forcibly relocated there to serve as labor. They carry a lot of baggage with them. Has that country, Cry Checking continues, has that country or others influenced your current and future travel living plans? Yeah, my plan is to not ever return to Kazakhstan. Not that I would be allowed because I was deported. But yeah, sobriety is a big factor in where I choose to live. I would never go and live in a dry country or a dry city like Dubai or, the UAE or Oman or something. No desire to do that. But I also I no longer want to put myself in the situations where alcohol is just so readily available. So yes, thank you for the very good question, Cry Checking. Account for JS Vid asks, do you think you will ever relapse? And then caveat, obviously I hope not, and I hope it's okay to ask. It is okay to ask. It's something that I think about all the time. I'll give it to you straight. There is always going to be a risk of relapse for me. Some times in my life are going to be worse than others, but there will always be a risk of a relapse. It's not, but that doesn't mean it's inevitable. I used to think that. In fact, a lot of sobriety talk and supporting each other through relapses does kind of imply that relapses are inevitable, and they're not. Some people just put down the drink and never go back to it. I'm not one of those people. But do I think I will ever relapse again? No. I don't think that I will. That, I'm aware, sounds like arrogance, and ego, and overconfidence. The reason why I'm confident to say that I don't think I will ever relapse is because I really turned a corner on it. I have this trick that I use for my sobriety. It's something that I recommend. If you've emailed me privately looking for advice, this is something I often say, because it's what turned a corner for me. I set time aside. I dedicated time in early sobriety to visualize the rest of my entire life without alcohol. And that was very important for me. That helped me fall into a groove where I'm no longer surviving moment to moment. I am able to visualize my entire life without alcohol. And when I do that, I imagine myself dying. As morbid as that sounds, I imagine the moments before my death and then imagine myself looking back on my life. That's how I do it. And I'm able to put myself in that mind and be comfortable that I have not had a drink or a relapse between this moment and my death. Hopefully in the long and distant future. And that exercise, it's a scary one to contemplate so morbidly. I know it's not for everyone, but for me, it's not really even a trick. It's a tool that's common across a lot of different scenarios. But taking that ability to visualize the future, to visualize step by step what my life will look like without alcohol has given me quite good ammunition to prevent a relapse from happening. Touch wood. Thank you for that very good question. Chris asks, hello and congrats in advance for the sobriety milestone. I had some questions for you some weeks ago, and originally I wanted to worm myself into a Q&A. Now is the moment. I remember you answering one of my comments on the I'll Quit on Monday video. One of my favourite ever videos, despite it being one of the worst ever performers. So, the first question: how do external circumstances, society or culture, or individual situations make an alcoholic comfortable in their alcoholism? Okay, so I interpret the question to mean, what external forces are acting on alcoholics that make them comfortable in their alcoholism? Okay, with that interpretation in mind, a lot. The prevalence of alcohol marketing. That's something that's close to home for me, so naturally I would say it. I work in marketing in niche industries myself, so I'm very aware of the effect and the impact and the techniques of marketing. And alcohol marketing doesn't always look like what you expect. It's not just TV adverts, not anymore, or billboards and that kind of thing. Alcohol marketing is smarter than that. So sometimes alcohol brands will have partnerships with non-alcohol related brands to do kind of shared collaborative marketing. So if you see an advert, for example, for like around Christmas, there is a turkey brand advertising its turkeys looking all beautiful and roasted and gorgeous, and it's saying, buy this turkey. And next to the turkey, in the side of the shot, you see an alcohol bottle where the label is in view. That is paid. That's like product placement within advertising. And it happens everywhere. You'll see TikTok influencers, for example, who just have alcohol on the shelves behind them. That's paid placements. Those are brand alignments. And that kind of it's not subliminal messaging in the sense that we understand it, like from the 60s subliminal messaging. But it is less than overt. And alcohol brands who struggle to get their products in front of younger audiences due to regulations will do techniques like that to get in front of you without you even noticing it. And the subconscious effect is that alcohol is all around us all the time and therefore must be acceptable, and we must be able to drink without consequence. So that's one, marketing. Another might be cultural pressure, not just acceptance, but pressure to drink, to be weird if you don't, to be an outsider, to lose a large part of your social life if you are not imbibing intoxicating levels of alcohol at every possible opportunity. That culture, everybody thinks that where they live is the worst for this. I get messages from people in Poland and from Croatia, which I've mentioned, North America. In North America, I get messages like, well, I live in Massachusetts, so you know what it must be like. And then I get the next one says, well, I live in Montana, so you know how bad it must be here. I live in New York, so you know. It's the same everywhere. There are very slight increases and decreases in rates of alcoholism in Western countries. But overall, the same pressures apply to all of us. The same in Germany and Ireland and Italy and Spain, and it's just all the same. And because it's all the same, we're encouraged to celebrate any accomplishment with a drink, but also to commiserate any bad news with a drink. And it reminds me of an ancient Greek fable. Do you know why we use the phrase, you blow hot and cold? Okay, so I'll explain very briefly. So I forget the specifics of it, but there's a young girl walking through this, she's lost in this forest, and she encounters a satyr, half horse, half human. And he has a pang of empathy, and he wants to help this lost girl, and he invites her into his lodge. And she's walking in the forest, she's very, very cold, and he sees her blowing on her hands like this. And he asks her what she's doing. And she says, I'm blowing on my hands to warm them. And he goes, okay, well, come into the lodge, I have some hot soup, that will warm you. And she sits at the table, he serves the soup, and it's too hot for her, so she blows on it. And the satyr says, what are you doing? And he says, well, the bowl is too hot, so I'm blowing on it to cool it. And immediately he freaks out and he throws her out into the forest. And he says, I won't have a creature who can cool things and warm them in the same breath, with the same breath. He sees it as magic. And that's where the phrase, why you blow hot and cold, comes from. And what the fuck was my point? Oh yeah, so alcohol's ability that you're supposed to drink it to commiserate, but also to celebrate. It's very strange. But none of it is true. Everything is better when you're sober. And Chris here goes on to ask, do you consider a position where non-struggling audience members might have something good to take from your videos? Has that ever been intentional? And would it ever be intentional? So, do I deliberately produce content for kind of moderate drinkers? No, I don't. Any benefit that they find is indirect. I'm grateful for it, but my audience and my experience and the people I want to talk to most are kind of what we used to call low bottom alcoholics, real rock bottom people. Those are my people. However, the audience that you suggest, these kind of like non-struggling drinkers, people who are not alcoholics, they do make up quite a sizable part of my audience. And I know that because they tell me regularly that they find it useful too. So they're catching strays from my sobriety content, I suppose, and I'm grateful for it. Thank you for the excellent questions, Chris. Husky Joe 22 asks, Husky Joe 22, I think that might be a Catch-22 reference, am I right? And I know that because I'm a big fan of that book, and I relate to Hungry Joe quite a lot. Anyway, the question is, did you have any medical or pain issues while you were heavily drinking? Yeah, I had, not acute, but I had pancreatitis when I was emerging from one particular relapse. I had constant pains, and not just pains, but also palpitations. I remember being in my apartment almost 2 weeks deep into a 1.5 litres of vodka a day binge and feeling palpitations like I was about to have a heart attack and die, and my immediate response to that was to quickly drink. But yes, when you're a drinker of that level, you're bouncing off the walls and you're falling down. You're covered in bruises all the time. And I'm covered in injuries from alcohol. Broken hands regularly, broken toes. I have this shoulder is badly dislocated because I was arrested squaring up to a cop, and he twisted my arm up my back so hard that my shoulder dislocated. And I have 2 broken ribs which will never heal in the sternum, also as a result of trying to fight the police. One of them kneed me in my rib cage while we were fighting and broke my ribs. Or he knelt on me, I think. He knelt on my rib cage until my ribs broke. What else? Just everything, man. I've got covered in scars and broken bits and sore bits and dislocated bits. As far as organs, though, yeah, the pancreatitis was bad. That's a horrible condition. Nothing lasting, organ-wise, though. My last liver test was really, really good. All of my blood work is good. My blood pressure is good. I really, really got off lightly, considering the volume and the speed at which I was drinking. The complete suicidal nature of my alcoholism, I got off really lightly. I'll take broken bones. The medical issues that I suffered were, as a direct result of alcohol, were usually things like delirium tremens, which I've had 4 times, maybe 5. It's hard to tell because the fifth example may have just been alcoholic psychosis. And I've had alcoholic hallucinosis and been hospitalized just for that several more times. So, yeah, I had all the short-term stuff, but nothing lasting. Thank you for the excellent question. Paint Binary Numbers asks, have you picked up any softer, less harmful addictions since quitting alcohol? I have a kind of working theory that there's just really one addiction, but with infinite variations and manifestations. So while I am no longer addicted or dependent on alcohol, that addiction is still there. It's just kind of diffused across a number of different smaller addictions. So you might not look at it because I'm kind of flabby at the moment, but I got into... My motivation to exercise was always good. I was a martial artist and a long-distance cyclist and a super marathon runner briefly once. So I was fit going into alcoholism. When I came out, exercise became a major release valve for me. What else? What other weird addictions might I have? No, not addictions. I have weird neuroses. Like, that have happened after I quit drinking. So I developed a serious fear of elevators, of lifts. I have to force myself to step into a lift now. That was never an issue before. I think I have to answer in the negative here. I don't have a porn addiction. I didn't switch to gambling. I don't do weed at all. I take a crazy amount of vitamins and creatine, I suppose. But aside from that, no, nothing new. Next up, my old mate, Shades of Clarity from Shades of Clarity channel. If you haven't checked out his channel, do so. I'll leave a link in the description of this one. This is a YouTubey question, which I always enjoy. Do you think doing what we do could potentially put us at risk as potential employers do deep dives into people's online content? I'm going to answer this differently for me and differently for everyone else. For me, no. I don't think there's a risk. I work in the adult industry, which has a very progressive attitude towards authenticity and to being honest and to even recovery from addiction. The adult industry is a relatively safe place for me to talk openly. Also, because I've worked in the adult industry for 21 years, I don't have a reputation to protect. And I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where if somebody wouldn't hire me because of my background with alcohol, I wouldn't want to work with them anyway. And that's the benefit of being self-employed, I suppose, and running your own business. However, for other people, yes, I do think there are consequences to putting this kind of stuff online. So, for example, let's take an average Joe. Let's just take a really normal job. Let's say you're a truck driver in recovery, and you go for a job, and there is a truck driver who is not in recovery, equally qualified, equal in every other respect. With a quick Google of your name, the job is probably going to go to the other guy. So yes, if my answer to that is there is a risk in that circumstance, then the answer has to be there is a risk in general. Also, there is a risk, especially for people like me. What I'm vulnerable to is people doxing me. People who have perhaps an ethical issue against the adult industry, the pleasure industry. It would be very easy. I'm not shy about my background and my history. My LinkedIn profile is on the homepage of the Backcountry website. It wouldn't be difficult for someone to sabotage me in some way, just based on their own moral principles. I would rather they talked to me directly first, but it is a possibility. To be honest, Shades, we're both straight white men. The real risk is for anyone who is not that. I think that women or queer people or people of colour who are doing this kind of content are much more at risk from the kind of risks that we don't even think about. They're much more likely to have it used against them maliciously. So I feel pretty safe. I'm also incredibly thick-skinned. If somebody wanted to come after me on the back of this, it doesn't matter. I have survived so much worse. Yeah, I understand the requirement for anonymity occasionally, but I don't need it. But yeah, I do see a risk. I do see a risk. Thank you for the very good YouTube-y question, Shades. I always enjoy us talking about YouTube stuff, so thank you for that. Cheeky Egg just says, this is definitely a non-sock week. It's not a question. But thank you. Trangle Dangle. Been with me for a very long time, Trangle Dangle. It's good to see you in the comments. Has having this channel taught you anything new about yourself or anything new about alcoholics? Have you had interesting revelations about alcoholism or alcoholics from trends that you see in your comments? Yeah, the biggest revelation is that people will say anything, rather than admit they have a problem. So as we mentioned a moment ago, a large part of my audience is people who don't struggle with alcohol and who are just watching casually. But as a part of that audience has started to become aware that they have a problem and they are super defensive about it. And they say crazy things like, I only drink 8 or 9 or 10 drinks on Friday, Saturday and Sunday, but I'm not an alcoholic. And okay, fine, forget the label alcoholic, but that is heavy drinking. 3 days straight, that is a binge per week, and that I would consider problematic drinking. So lots of excuses out there. Not to be so damning about men, having just said what I said to Shades, but now it's on my mind. One of the other conspicuous things that I've learned is that I get a lot of emails from sober partners of alcoholics, and they are always women. I have never had... I did some maths the other day. I added up comments across my Instagram channel. Do follow me on Instagram for some more personal stuff. Across Instagram, across the YouTube comments, and across my emails, I've had 30,000 comments or emails since I started this channel. And not a single one has ever said, my wife has threatened me and locked me out of the house. Whereas I could pull up dozens of those, of the opposite, of husbands and boyfriends who've been shitty to their wives and girlfriends. That's not to say that it doesn't happen, obviously, and that's not to say that that men don't suffer domestic abuse in the same way that women do. They do. But the rate of men becoming gross and difficult and shitty because of alcohol just seems to be higher. Also, I've learned a huge amount about delirium tremens, about alcohol withdrawal, about the neuropsychology and neurobiology of alcohol in the process of this channel. I have learned that I have a huge capacity to respond to people. If you haven't got a response, by the way, it's nothing personal, but I found out today that quite a lot of people have been messaging me through my website, through the little chat box, and that goes to an inbox that I don't ever check. So my email address is always in the description. If you do want to reach out, and I encourage you to do so because I love talking to people, then use that email address, because I opened that inbox today for the first time to speak to Stephen Curry, another sober YouTuber, and discovered hundreds of unread messages from months ago. And what else? Interesting revelations. Just the alcoholics represent, self-describing alcoholics represent a very, very small minority of alcoholics, because the vast majority of alcoholics just don't realize they're alcoholics. Those are the people who are sitting on the sofa and just drinking large amounts of alcohol, but without feeling like anything's wrong. And I think that represents the majority. Thank you for the question, Trangle Dangle. Always good to see you in the comments. Zachary Walsh asks, do you have any thoughts on people who might watch your channel with the goal of better moderating their drinking instead of quitting altogether? Okay, so similar question to one I just answered, but phrased differently. If people are watching, are coming to me looking for advice on how to drink moderately, frankly, you're in the wrong place. My advice always is that no amount of alcohol is good for you, and everyone would be better if they quit. That said, I'm not on a campaign, I'm not on a crusade, I'm not trying to convert people. I'm just trying to help people who know they have a problem. But that's my response. There are plenty of other YouTube channels to talk about how you might be able to drink moderately, but I am of the old school. The old school recently backed up by modern science that no amount of alcohol is good for you and that everybody should quit. Thank you, Zachary, for the good question. Next, the rocker Tommy. Stu, can you pinpoint the moment the pain of stopping became less than that of continuing? What a brilliant question. What was it that stuck and turned you around the corner that so many cannot find? That's a real thinker. What was the moment when stopping, the pain of stopping, was less than the pain of continuing to drink? I had so many of those moments and they didn't stop me. Before I quit finally, I'd come so close to death several times, both through delirium tremens and just through dangerous situations. Any one of them would have stopped a rational person. The problem is, alcoholics are just not rational people. And alcoholism is not a rational condition. You cannot reason with it. But for me, I suppose, the reason it finally got me sober, I'd had several rock bottoms, and looking back, I'm grateful for them. I personally needed them. Not everybody needs to be as bad as I was, but I did. And my final relapse, the one that finally got me sober, the one that the milestone that I'm celebrating today, wasn't actually as bad as the previous one, the one before that. And I think it was just like, it was like the first few days that I was on the detox ward, in the psych ward, and then out of it, was just so miserable. Surveying the destruction I had wrought on my life and on my loved ones and on my career, and the damage that was done. There wasn't a single moment. It was cumulative. Yeah, I think that's true. There came a moment of critical mass. It wasn't one single trigger, but rather just an accumulation of absolute misery and being close to death that eventually has stopped me. I wonder if you ask the other YouTuber liver disease, I would love to hear his answer to that. I bet he's covered it somewhere, but I'd like to put that question to him to see if that diagnosis that he got of his disease was what made him stop. Because I never had anything like that. And as a result, I kind of bounced around relapses for quite a long time. So yeah, there wasn't one particular moment. It was more like an aggregation of just terrible living. Thank you for the real thinker. I really appreciate it. The Connection. Hello, Stu, long-time fan and viewer. Thank you for your long-time support. Long-time caller, first-time commenter. Welcome. How do you feel about the romanticism of alcohol, and how do you manage that? He continues, I'm a professional bartender, so not only am I surrounded by booze, but my job relies on understanding various liquors, telling stories and crafting drinks that combine those elements. The romanticism of a pre-dinner martini, a spritz on the piazza, or a pint after work in an empty city bar, it's all very alluring and makes it extremely difficult to have long periods of sobriety. And he continues, I'm not going to read your name out, Marco. I just did it. All right, Marco, since you included it here, thank you, Marco, for the thoughtful comment, the excellent question. So, regarding the romanticism of alcohol, yeah, I was a sucker for that, but for exactly the same reasons. In fact, I still am a tiny little bit. My romanticism is different. When I picture alcohol fondly, it's a specific moment in time. And it is the walk from my office in Shanghai around Shujiahui, around Shanghai Stadium to my apartment, and drinking a bottle of Johnny Walker Red Label from my inside pocket as I walked. And a separate one is a waterside restaurant in Berlin, where the beer was very good and icy cold and sitting on the water in the summer. Still has a little bit of romantic appeal to me. The actual answer to your question, Marco, is that by the end of my drinking, there was a 5-year period where all of that romanticism had stopped. It was no longer romantic. That 5-year period of relapses and sobriety was utterly dismal. And that is the filter, that is the lens through which I view alcohol now. It's just utter depravity and dejection and suicidality, genuinely, not just ideation, but really hard depression, isolation, anxiety, all of that stuff. That's what I see when I look back on alcohol. I'm not able to see through that. Any romanticism I have for alcohol is seen through that prism. So it's impossible for me to see alcohol romantically anymore. And I'm grateful for that. You don't have that issue. And I hope that you never do, because it's not worth it. I understand the position you're in. A lot of my audience, including myself, I used to be a chef in the early days, or like very early days. The service industry is notoriously hard to be sober in. It's not impossible, and there are sober bars popping up around the place. In fact, I've given some thought into opening one myself as a side project to another business. Backcountry is a business behind the scenes, and I would like a physical space, perhaps with a sober bar that's not just alcohol-free beer plus mocktails, but just really good drinks for people who don't drink alcohol. That's probably not possible for me. I don't have the experience, but you might want to pursue that. If you've got the capital, or you can find some investors, or reach out to me. I know there's another person in my audience that I've been talking about this with, and there'd be some excited people to discuss it. God, it is 36 degrees in here, and I have to turn the air conditioning off to film. So excuse me being disgusting, hence the scruffy attire today. Endo Gladry, another long-time supporter of the channel, says, I recently finished listening to the audiobook for Just Crazy Enough to Work. It was fantastic, by the way. Thank you very much for that. Everybody keeps saying that. It makes me feel very self-conscious. I'm dying to see the Calpaks that you were acquired in Kyrgyzstan. Could you show us your cool hats and if you still have them with you? I would love to. They're in storage in Berlin. I didn't bring them with me to where I currently live, but I will go back and get them. But I will insert a photograph of them here somewhere. Those are my Calpaks that I picked up. One of them one was a gift, and the other I picked up in a bazaar in Osh, I think. Second part of the question, your tattoos are pretty swell. I especially love the So It Goes tattoo on your hand. My boyfriend has that saying on his leg. Excellent. And as a stick and poke tattoo. Would you mind giving us a little tour of your favourite tattoos with some insight into what they mean? Yeah. Okay, so all of them are, even before I got sober, are related to sobriety in one way or another. I have one on my foot. My feet are disgusting because I've been walking the dog. There's no way this is ever going to show. So originally, this tattoo on the sole of my foot said discipline, and I got it in my mid-20s. Ironically, I was not sober back then, but I recognised that I needed some discipline in my life. But ironically, I was drinking Jack Daniels while the tattooist worked on me. And then there was a crowd, because it's quite unusual to see someone get the sole of their foot tattooed. So It Goes is what it says on my hand, on my fingers. This is from Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, where it is a refrain repeated throughout the book, especially whenever anyone dies. Then the character just says, "So it goes." And over time, throughout the course of the book, it's revealed that "So it goes" is a kind of a reflection, like a philosophical reflection on the passage of time. And I won't go into too much detail because I could talk about it in quite dense detail for a long time, but it becomes a very profound, this phrase, "so it goes," as you learn more about the nature of the passage of time as told in Slaughterhouse-Five, it takes on a very, very profound meaning. One that really connected with me, and with millions of other people who love Slaughterhouse-Five. Next is Catch-22. This was, I think, maybe my first tattoo. Another book that had a major impact on me. More, not to do with sobriety, this one, more to do with kind of the contradictory and paradoxical nature of existence, really. Catch-22 is all about how insane people handle sane situations and sane people handle insane situations. It's not a very good summary, but Catch-22 was very influential on my writing. And since you mentioned Just Crazy Enough to Work, you might notice some of my writing style is quite influenced by Joseph Heller. They're the author of Catch-22. Next up, the tree. I designed this in a sense. This is the Tree of Life from Irish mythology, but I mirrored it, so it's identical. The roots are identical to the branches. It's based on the phrase, the quote, "For a tree to reach up to heaven, its roots must reach down to hell." And I found that to be quite an apt description of my own journey through sobriety. And just to hammer it home, I have "As above, so below" tattooed on the opposite side. And then the other one that's directly related to sobriety is this. This figure committing harikari. He's inserting a sword into his stomach, but it's emerging the other side as a blossom tree. And that's symbolic to me of how self-destruction can be repurposed as creativity, which is a very big defining point of my own life. I truly believe that. You can repurpose all of your negative emotions and your negative experiences into creativity. And that is what I aspire to do. Thank you for the great questions, Endogladry. Murgles asks, "What made you decide to get a puppy? Can we hear her story?" So yeah, my dog is a rescue from a farm outside Limassol here in Cyprus. And I grew up with a dog, and I love animals. I love cats, I love dogs. I have a huge amount of empathy and love for all animals. I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan or anything, I just like animals, I think they're cool. And I saw this dog. I won't explain how I came across her, it's just not. I saw her, I knew she was perfect, and I knew that I could raise her and that she would be challenging. And I have been proven correct. She is the best and most amazing dog in the world. I got her for my 40th birthday, which was back in March, and that was also a sobriety milestone. I wanted to give myself... I wanted a dog for a long time, and I found myself here in a position where I could do it, and I could devote the time required to raise a dog healthily, and the space and the love. And so far I've been correct. She is currently 6.5 months old, and doing great. Her name is Leica. I have a thing. Do I have it here? Yeah. As a photographer, naturally, I really like Leica cameras. So that's her name. And also Leica, just by coincidence, is the name of the first dog in space. And I think that's worth remembering. She's Australian Shepherd mixed with some kind of shark, I think. Some kind of shark. Next, thank you for the question. Next up, Chasing Whispers asks, in quite a long question, which I'm going to summarize rather than read verbatim. Do you feel emotional or triggered when recounting your alcoholism stories to us? If so, how do you manage to keep your tone and manner so calm and seemingly detached throughout? Is there some come down or anxiety you face after reliving those memories and thoughts with us? And do you look forward to or dread possible judgment in the comments? I'm going to answer the last part of that question first. Do I dread the negative comments, the judgment? No, I don't care. I am perfectly willing to accept the criticism and judgment. That comes with the territory. Do I feel triggered when I recount stories of rock bottoms and delirium tremens and withdrawal? No. It is draining, though, to summon up that information. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll tell you my secret for handling that. When I know the subject of a video is going to be incredibly heavy, for example, if it's one of the first delirium tremens video I did, or it's the one about loneliness that I did, the more popular ones on my channel, I write them first. Because it takes a lot out of me emotionally to revisit those experiences, especially if those experiences also involve my parents or loved ones or girlfriend, because that's what hurts me the most to think back on. So to prevent it from being too overwhelming, I write them really comprehensively before I record them. But I'll be talking from memory mostly. But the process of writing it, one, helps me formulate my thoughts so that my videos stay relatively focused. But also, it helps me process the emotions before I have to recount them to you. There are exceptions. So I remember one very vividly where I was talking about an experience I had in Azerbaijan, where I'd been living rough for about 3 weeks when my passport was stolen. And I recounted the story about the embassy staff who were helping me get back to the UK, and how, I'm getting emotional even now remembering it, the security guard who was bringing lunch from his home for me, he just the security guard at the embassy, and how the embassy staff did everything they could to keep me safe. That story makes me emotional. However, that's in the book in detail. But yeah, sometimes it catches me out, like it just did. It does. It's usually the positive stuff that gets me, like the goodness in people sometimes makes me emotional, rather than the bad stuff. Is there any more? As far as sounding detached, I hope I don't sound too detached. But, like, another secret, since I told you about the writing thing, I should tell you this as well. I quite enjoy this stuff. I quite enjoy having a record of even my worst experiences. I feel myself getting better at doing it. Like, it's not just recounting alcoholism stories and stuff. It's also an exercise in communication. And I like that process. I like getting better at it. And at the end, you mention you're on 141 days. Huge congratulations. That's a big old chunk. Thank you very much for the question. You revealed your name at the end to be Kat. Thank you, Kat. Hello. Are you in the... You want to be in the video? There you are. There you are, my little puppums. My little sharkums. You my little sharkums. You my little sharkums. Husky Joe again. Can you describe your favourite place you've lived or had an extended stay? And do you think environment plays a role in sobriety? My favourite place that I've ever been was Shanghai. China was life-altering for me. I loved every second apart from the terrible stuff that happened. Yeah, so it was China in general. I'm happiest when I'm furthest from home, as a general rule. And China is about as far as it gets. And on the whole, my experience there was unbelievable. I think that environment does play a role to a certain extent. I don't think you can blame the environment for your drinking. If you're in a negative environment, you have an obligation to improve your environment or leave it. And secondly, the place that I dream about, that I really look back on, was Méribel in France, where I lived when I was 21 to 22, only for like 6 months. I lived in a valley looking down towards Mont Blanc and was living in the Alps and the mountains every day. That was by far the most beautiful place I've lived. And that's become important as I get older, is living somewhere beautiful. Thank you for the second question, Husky Joe. Next up, Mikla. How do you deal with cravings? I'm a recovering addict from over-the-counter drugs such as DXM, Benzodrex, Benadryl and other drugs like coke, weed, alcohol and kratom, and would like some advice. Thank you. Cravings have long faded away for me. I don't get a craving at all anymore. But I remember them vividly, and I remember how persuasive they could be. There are a few. There's the one that no one else ever talks about, so I'll just say it up front. Sorry, Mum, masturbation. That's an instant urge killer. The dopamine release will just wash away the urge. Sex as well, but if sex isn't available, masturbation is a good option. Sugary things, exercise, breathing exercises. You know, the masturbation thing is the only unique one that I've got to say, because there are plenty more better positioned people to talk about cognitive behavioural therapy for dealing with urges and that kind of thing than me. Fighting, yeah, boxing. An urge, like, it's not possible for everybody, but putting on some boxing gloves and going hitting the heavy bag, that would keep the urge away for the rest of the day. Other than that, sugary sweets. Actually, for me, it was more like sour stuff, like salt and vinegar crisps. That was more effective. Man, I could have some right now, actually. You know, the ultimate trick that I learned was that you have to kind of look the urge in the eye. And that a better strategy for me, and for some people, maybe not everybody, is to just look the urge in the eye and face it down. Like, just stare it down and confront it. And don't try to cover it up with other things. Just meet it head on. Easier said than done, I know, especially in early sobriety. And there are theories out there, especially in AA, about urge surfing. I think it's called that. There are better resources than this channel to talk about that stuff. But I appreciate the question. Thank you very much. My old friend Peter, from the early days of the channel once again. Can you recall the closest call you've had to relapsing since you became sober? And how did you eventually avoid it? Alright, I'm going to have to think about this one. The most I've had my sobriety challenged was an event. I documented it on the channel, an event that I organised for a business in Berlin at a restaurant called Kink. And I was the event organiser for that. A role that I had never performed before and have no desire to do again. But that was a big drinking adult industry night. And I knew that was... But on the night, I didn't feel like I was close to relapse. That had the most potential for relapse. But the closest I've actually come... So it was before this period of sobriety. It was in another period before this, where it was in lockdown. I managed to survive most of lockdown quite well, but there was a Christmas where I was alone. I hadn't met my current girlfriend, and no one could travel. My family had made plans to come out to spend Christmas with me, or I go to them, or something. And then on Christmas Eve, and we had just agreed it would be fine, and we'd do it over Skype or whatever it was back then, Zoom. And on Christmas Eve, I suddenly bottomed out, and I went to the shop, and I bought a bottle of vodka. And I'd been sober a long time, like quite a long time, not as long as this time, but I'd been sober a while then. And there was some deep loneliness about that period, and I'd just come off medication for depression. And I walked out of my local Aldi with a bottle of vodka, and I crossed the road and I opened it, and then I put it in the bin instead of drinking it. And that was this close. After that, I did relapse again later, but that was the closest I've ever come without actually doing it, I think. In this period of sobriety, it's been different this time. It hasn't been like that. I don't think I've really been close at all in this stint, which is coming up not far off. Well, yeah, a couple of years. Something was different this time, so I haven't had a close call this time yet. Touch wood, touch wood. Thank you for the great question, Pete. Always good to see you here. Zek asks, I drink several beers of pretty weak stuff almost every night. I'm an artist, a very mediocre one at best. That's what all artists say. And I enjoy a few beers when I paint. Would you strongly advise me to stop this? I'm over 50 and have been drinking beer for over 30 years. I'm in fairly decent physical health, but I'm guessing my liver isn't tip-top these days. I'm just going to take this question on face value. If what you told me is true, then you perhaps don't need to quit outright. My honest feeling is that what you just told me is not true, and I think you need to quit. So that's how it is. You've got a lot of responses here, trying to figure out where you are on the line, or on the the alcoholism spectrum. I suspect anybody who is asking whether they drink too much, drinks too much. Fact. I will not be argued with. And if somebody is contemplating sobriety, then you need to be sober. It's already happened. It's only going to get worse from now unless you do something about it. But I shouldn't be so cynical. I should give you the benefit of the doubt. If you feel like you need to quit, then you need to quit. That's my answer. Only you know. But since you have asked specifically for what I think about it, I think everybody should quit. Thank you for the question. Do share, if you happen to watch this for the answer, please do put a link to your art somewhere. Let us know how we can find it, because I would love to take a look. Okay, next one. Did you choose to stop drinking to take care of yourself, or because it was too painful to see your loved ones hurting? Both. Those are not mutually exclusive. I was drinking for selfish reasons, and I quit for selfish reasons. And it was also far too painful to see the effect it was having on the people around me. So both. A confluence of forces forced me to quit. Thank you for that very good question. And finally, from Kivo. What is the most disgusting alcoholic drink you ever drank? I met a guy at the psych ward that said he drank bottles of hand sanitizer in his room. My personal worst is Fene Branca. I have such a good answer to this, so I'm going to answer it now briefly, and then I'm going to do a full video about this, because my answer is I have a really good answer. Okay, so it's like this. Yeah, I drank hand sanitizer too, briefly, and mouthwash. But I'm going to take you back 25 years to when I was about 15, maybe 14. This was the worst alcoholic thing I've ever put in my body on purpose. So, when I was 14 or 15, I knew what alcohol was. I'd already been drunk, and I was already kind of like looking to the dark side of alcohol. And me and my friend, Ben, remember his full name. We haven't spoken since school, but I remember this. So we knew that alcohol was ethanol, and there was ethanol in the science lab in school. So after school once, we finished school at 3:30 p.m. and we kept on our school uniforms. We left, we waited for all the teachers to leave, and then we snuck back into the school. You can't do this stuff anymore because it's all locked down, but back then you just open a door. No, in fact, we went through an open window, which we had left open before we left, I remember. And we snuck into the science department and we stole 2 bottles of ethanol. Except it wasn't ethanol, I think it was methylated spirit. Something. Some terrible chemical compound, some solution it's not fit for human consumption anyway. And we went back to my garage in my parents' house before they came home from work. And we poured the ethanol into bottles of Ribena. You know, the child drink, that's what we were drinking, is Ribena. So we made it alcoholic. We made our own, what we used to call scumbag cocktail of ethanol and Ribena. And holy shit, we both got alcohol poisoning. Incredibly dangerous. If I had done it today at 40, I would die. But I survived. We didn't even have to go to the hospital. But it was a different kind of drunkenness from anything that I'd experienced before or since, except when here's another one. I drank formaldehyde in China. Okay, so there was a pub called the Park Tavern in Shanghai, near where my office was, and it's where a few of us used to go to drink after work. And one day they got in fake Heineken that had been made in some guy's bathtub down the street and put in a keg and brought to the pub. It wasn't, as far as I'm aware, it wasn't the landlord's fault. I don't think it was his fault. He's a sober guy now too, though. That tells you everything you need to know. But we drank it. I had 3 of those, and my vision went. And I made a fool of myself in front of some of my colleagues that night. I had 3 of those beers, and I was fucked. And I woke up. A policeman woke me up. I'd fallen in a bush on the way home, and even that's unusual for me, even at my worst drunkenness. I lost consciousness and blacked out in a bush, and a policeman woke me up. And I had problems with my vision for days, and we didn't find out until sometime afterwards that it was formaldehyde. Because formaldehyde is a preservative. So if you're making fake consumables like drinks or food or whatever, formaldehyde will keep it fresher longer. It will also kill you. And if I had more than 3 that night, I was the only person drinking that particular beer, so no one else noticed, but it was. The landlord told us later. So yeah, one was the ethanol in Ribena when I was a child, and the second was formaldehyde in fake beer when I was in Shanghai. Excellent question. I'm going to spin that off into a whole video, I think, because it's kind of entertaining. Okay, that was long. That was an hour and 8 minutes of recording, an hour and 16 minutes of recording. It's hot as hell in here. I need to feed my dog. Thank you for all of the questions over the last day or so since I posted the community post. Thank you very much for watching. As always, good luck out there.